This FT special report is supported by Rabobank.
Hello, I'm Anna Gross. I'm a markets reporter for the Financial Times. This is the first audio feature for a series of special reports on sustainable food and agriculture. In this episode, we'll be looking at the challenges facing farmers in the Amazon and how the lessons learned could have wider implications for future global food production and agriculture worldwide.
What I see now is a shift in this landscape from pasture lands to small-scale agriculture to this more highly intensified agriculture that is connected with global markets.
This is Dr. Paulo Brando, an expert on tropical ecology. His work explores the fragility of natural ecosystems, especially those that are constantly disturbed and under frequent attack.
You talk to a farmer in a small city in the Amazon, and then they have been to China or the Netherlands or Europe to learn more about how to export their products, how to gain access to different markets, what they should do in terms of sustainability to keep being competitive. So there's this massive now difference within the Amazon in terms of economic activities and investments and connectivity with international markets. So this for me is quite remarkable that in a few years that I've been working there, you'll see this major transformation happening across massive tracts of land. There are lots of visionary producers, farmers, that are following the law, that have access to European markets, and they are trying to increase the sustainability of their production. And those folks, those farmers, play a key role in conservation in the Amazon because they are business people and they do not want it to be in the same bag as people stealing land, killing people to steal land. So those farmers, if they succeed, it is a model that could protect part of the Amazon. Now, if their production systems are not viable in the next couple of decades, then that becomes a huge problem for conservation.
Dr. Brando is a key contributor to the fifth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He's also worked with the Amazon Environment Research Institute. And last summer, he testified to Brazilian Congress about the fires we saw in the Amazon.
So when I go there and I see all this transformation happening, the first thought that I have is like, how do we measure the vulnerability, not only of these big producers that are trying to conserve forests, but how we sort of try to find the situation, the conditions that allow these indigenous folks to produce their own food. We don't exactly know where this number is, this deforestation number is, but it is getting closer for sure. Some folks say 20%, some say 30%, 40% of the Amazon. If you clear, we are going to inflict pain in the rest of the forests elsewhere.
I was angry with what I saw. I went to the heart of the Amazon, north of Manaus, where normally you'd see virgin rainforest, and the smoke was coming in. You could smell it in the air. You could see fires on the horizon. There's something really quite bad going on there right now.
This is Fred Pearce, author of When the Rivers Run Dry, The Global Water Crisis and How to Solve It. As a science writer, he's spent the past 20 years researching and looking into the global environment and development issues across 64 countries. The crisis facing Brazil and the Amazon is top of his list.
And it is not just me as a foreigner saying that. You talk to the Brazilian scientists, you talk to Brazilian agriculturalists, you talk to many Brazilian politicians and people in civil society. They are angry too. They realize that something bad has gone wrong here and it really has to be rectified, and pretty quickly.
So can you tell me a bit about the Xingu region you visited?
It's an old forested region. It's less than a century since people used to go out there seeking lost cities of gold. But it's changed a lot now. There is still the Xingu Indigenous Reserve, which is a large forested indigenous area. But right over the fence from that, in the center of the state of Mato Grosso, are some of the world's largest soy farms. And these are huge plantations, 100,000 hectares, that kind of size. This is really big agribusiness. So you can literally step over the fence from untouched rainforest to vast farms.
And why is it a good area to study the effects of some of the things we've been seeing in the Amazon recently, the fires, the deforestation?
Because it's right on the border, it's on the edge of the rainforest, and so it's the most vulnerable part of the rainforest. It's the part of the rainforest that people in some places are still clearing. I saw a lot of burning going on while I was there, but it is also an area which is being used very intensively. So it's right on the cusp. It's also an area which scientists there believe is on the verge of what they call savannization. In other words, that they believe the climate is starting to change in ways which will mean that it can no longer be rainforest. And it will naturally, because of rising temperatures, more droughts, longer dry seasons, is naturally going to turn into a grassland. So it's the front line for the rainforest in very many ways, both in terms of changing climate and what people are doing with the land.
I've visited several soy farms and communities in the Amazon and also in the neighboring savanna, which is known as the Cerrado.
Yeah.
And I saw just how much water was needed for irrigation and the quantities of pesticides used to prevent crop loss. And I'm just wondering, from what you saw when you were in Brazil, does it seem to you that these huge soy plantations are actually viable? Or do you think we might start needing to move towards a different form of farming?
The issue is Brazil, on the face of it, has an awful lot of water. It's the Amazon is the world's biggest river, and rainfall is what sustains the rainforest. But it is starting to change. Dry seasons are getting longer. Droughts are starting to appear. Natural fires are starting to turn up, which they didn't before. So things are changing, partly because people are chopping down the forest, and that reduces the amount of rainfall in the surrounding region, including to the south in the Cerrado, and also because of global climate change. So there are concerns about whether there will be enough rain in future to sustain the soy farms. And some of the farmers are now switching to other crops. The farm that I was in, the Tanguro farm, run by the Maji Corporation, is switching this year for the first time to cotton. So there are changes going on, and there are certainly concerns that soy may not be the future there.
And is that one of the main concerns that you're seeing, that intensive kind of farming is actually going to sort of counterintuitively prevent farming in the future?
Yes, that's the really big concern, is that the clearing of the rainforest, 20% of the forest is gone, and in the last year we've seen a resurgence in deforestation, is starting to change the climate, heating up the land, reducing rainfall in ways that are going to make farming less easy, and in some cases impossible, not just within the Amazon region itself, but down to the south in the Cerrado and even on to in the Pampas in Argentina. Because the other piece of science that's been going on is to learn how moisture travels through the region along the jet streams. And it turns out that the Amazon recycles a lot of the moisture coming in off the Atlantic Ocean. And if you take away the Amazon, the whole of the center of the continent could dry out. And these flying rivers, which they talk about, bringing moisture inland and south through the continent, will begin to fail. So that could have repercussions, not just for people trying to farm on the edge of the Amazon, but people trying to farm in the Cerrado and people trying to farm in the Pampas to the south in Argentina and indeed Uruguay. So you could say that the people who've got rich through deforestation, but they are now talking the talk about a more sustainable approach, ending deforestation and making more intensive use of the land that's already cleared. And as many of them, including some of the big agribusiness companies say, taking more of the rainforest could jeopardize that economic development by making farming harder to do and perhaps impossible.
In my most recent visits to Brazil, it seems like politics and even sort of the agricultural sector is divided between ideologues on one side, and Bolsonaro can be considered one of them, and then the pragmatic, practical group on the other side that are concerned about, endless expansion, affecting their reputation and affecting, as you say, their ability to keep producing. And yeah, it's hard to see how they're going to find a solution going forward because there seems to be such a big split.
Well, they were finding a solution. Since 2004, principally under Lula, they reduced deforestation rates quite dramatically by 70 or 80% by adopting the philosophy that they could have the economic development with existing cleared land. There's now been a switch back, which is really because Bolsonaro is, I think, probably receives funding from and certainly feels able to represent the people who still want to clear land, who are speculators in land. So there are, if you like, as you say, there are two wings in the agricultural community, and the political power seems to have switched temporarily, at least, from one to the other. It's all up for grabs, I think. It's a very interesting moment. One of the things that, of course, that the big agribusiness companies fear is a backlash from the rest of the world. They rely very much on European and indeed Chinese markets to sell their goods. And if the Europeans start not wanting to buy from Brazil because of repeats, perhaps, of this year's fires, then that's bad for those agribusiness companies as well. They won't be able to sell their soya to British chicken farms as their feed. So, there are two approaches to this in Brazil, and which one wins, I think, is not clear at this moment.
Is there a sort of silver lining? Is there a way of preventing the destruction of Brazil's rainforest and protecting those water supplies?
Yes, there is. Brazil was rather successful at doing it over certainly the period between about 2005 and 2014, when there were active policies for enforcing the rule of law in the Amazon. The other thing to say is that there are very good laws in Brazil for protecting the Amazon. Farmers in the Amazon are required to keep 80% of their land as forested. A lot of the land, including the farms that I visited, don't have anything like that, but they are required to work back to that point to do planting programs, and indeed some of them do that. So really it's about enforcing existing laws. And the argument that they need to clear the forest, well, the forest is being cleared largely by speculators who take state land, take it as their own and await for an amnesty and then try and sell it on and make some money. So it's a very kind of quasi-criminal activity, much of the land clearance. Brazil, for a decade, enforced the law. It set up programs like Responsible Soy and a number of consumer-based initiatives to try and stop companies processing crops grown illegally or grown on illegally cleared land. And they were passably successful. They didn't completely stop deforestation, but they reduced it, as I say, by 70 or 80%. Brazil really only needs to go back to that, but that requires political will because the Amazon is a very large place. There is large room for criminality to go on without anybody much noticing. So there has to be a real effort to police it, but it can be done. It has been done.
Agencies like IBAMA and ECMBO, these are the government agencies that are tasked with identifying criminal activity. According to news sources and according to officials who work there, saying that their resources have been massively cut over the past few years. They don't have the staff, they don't have the money to actually identify the crimes when they're happening.
The land speculators have taken whatever the government may say when it's talking to Europeans, they've taken very clearly the message that it's okay to clear the land again, and that's what they're doing. And they understand that the regulatory authorities have been told to back off. Even when they discover deforestation going on, they've been told not to prosecute, to take a lenient line. And speculators, get that message pretty quickly. So yes, those agencies have got to be put back and properly funded. Still, the country is still operating its more or less unique in the world satellite monitoring system. It knows pretty much in real time if people are burning and deforesting the land. And if there isn't obviously a political commitment from the top to the agencies tasked with this work, then the people on the ground are going to take a pretty clear message that it's okay, really. Whatever they tell the Europeans, whatever they tell the international community, nobody's really going to be tough with you.
Fred Pearce, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot for coming into the Financial Times.
Thank you very much.